All right, welcome to the DVM Project. I'm Dr. Melanie Barham, and I'm joined today by Shawn Wilkie, who is the CEO of Talkatoo. So thanks for joining us, Shawn.
Oh, Melanie, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, Shawn, I'm going to just throw it over to you and get you to introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your career path as an entrepreneur and just tell us how you got to where you got to.
Yeah, sounds good. It reminds me of the Global Vet Summit, which is where we all met, right? I've done this
That's
before with
right.
you. So my name is Shawn Wilkie. Currently, I'm the CEO of Talkatoo. We're a voice recognition software company based in Halifax with people all across Canada. We've got a small office in Vancouver and some people in Newfoundland. And then most of us are based in Halifax, but that's all changed with the world, hasn't it? We're all remote. And I'm also the co host of the Veterinary Innovation Podcast, which I absolutely love doing. And I think that's how we first got connected, which is
Mhm.
super cool. We've been having lots of conversations, had you on our podcast recently, which was a lot of fun. And then I guess if I walk back through my career, it's been mostly entrepreneurship. I have had a few different careers. And I've got a chance to work all over the world. So I mainly always have been involved in some sort of technology, with the exception of a bit of a real estate kind of portfolio kind of on the side. I've founded probably four tech companies now. This is my second software company. Yeah, and I guess that's a nutshell. So I'm a university dropout. Went to university and then community college, and then just kind of get caught up in running businesses, and one led to the another, to the next. And luckily, I've never had any massive failures. I've not bankrupted any companies yet, but I've learned all kinds of lessons and had my fair share of failures on what has been a 20-year path in running and starting businesses.
Cool. So when I asked our community about what they wanted to know about entrepreneurs, and when I recalled some of the conversations that I've had with other veterinarians who have been interested in entering the entrepreneurial space, a couple of things came up. And one of the things was, um, when you're starting a company, do you need to have investors? And if so, what do you have any tips for getting investors or for accessing funding
Yeah,
and that
so
type of thing?
I would say probably you don't need to have investors, but you need to have money. So if you don't have any of that, you might need you might need an investor or two. I've done my fair share of actually both kind of types of startups. So one where people would kind of call bootstrapping, which is kind of where you use what little resources you may have, and you grow the business based upon the ability of the business to self-sustain. And so, I have a company in my past called Robotnik, which was an IT services company, and that's exactly how we grew that business. We grew that business with $25,000. Started it just as I dropped out of university. I actually dropped out of university to start that company, and we had $25,000. We had no other money. The banks wouldn't give us any money, and we literally took that business from a little tiny company where me and my partner ran it, to a company that had over 20 staff. And I think our best year ever, we had over $5 million in sales. So you can do it a combination of ways. If it's a more traditional business, maybe investors don't make sense, or maybe friends and family investors, which everybody's heard of that. And it's literally just that. It's people that believe in you enough to give you their money. And then the other route is VCs, and then of course banks. So there's all these different ways that you can access capital. The easiest way is if you have a little bit yourself. It de-risks it and then allows you to kind of prove it out and know there's no easier way than to get an investor than to be able to say, I've put this money in myself, I've turned
Mhm,
this investment into this much revenue, and I know if I get more money I can do this, because then it proves it. And
mhm,
people don't like risky investments. Even investors or venture capital firms don't like risky investments. They like an investment that they absolutely buy into the vision, they see the potential, and there may be an element of risk, but somebody that's going to make an informed investment is doing it because they always believe that it will lead to some form of exit or some form of repayment. So,
Mhm.
that's, I think, a really important thing, to kind of mention. That is, you know, anybody that's going to make an investment automatically is like a cheerleader on your team, and they believe that it will turn into what you believe it will turn into. And so you almost need to have this kind of self-imposed delusion if you want to start a company, because you need to be able to believe that you're going to be successful no matter what, because the only way to get anybody to invest in you is if they believe what you tell them. And you need to be able to believe in yourself so passionately that you can make it happen.
And articulate it clearly.
Yeah, that's a challenge as well, especially when you don't even necessarily know what you're doing. And I've started companies like that. I've started companies where I'm like, oh, I think this is a really great idea, and then uh, you know, 10 10 weeks down the road or 10 months down the road, you realize that, oh no, this wasn't a good idea. So yeah, that happens as well.
So, if you were looking at pitching an idea to, let's say, you got in with a venture capital firm to give a pitch, do you have any ideas about how to make your elevator pitch better, or how
Yeah.
to really succinctly improve that, or any resources that you could share?
Yeah, so I think one resource that I would share is a book called Pitch Anything. It's an incredible book. Pitching to investors is like the most psychological warfare that any entrepreneur is ever going to participate in. These people that make multi-million dollar investments are able to use a skill that they've developed over years of being an investor to make a decision within the first 60 seconds of meeting with people that may be pitching them on
Mhm.
anything. So you need to understand all of those elements. And there's new techniques on how to pitch and what it should look like all the time. But one of the things that I think is probably one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received around pitching is if you can get the investors speaking, it, it changes the entire conversation. Whether that's by giving them enough information to make them ask the obvious questions, which result in an incredibly articulate, well informed, and educated conversation that you can show that you know what you're talking about things, or whether it's getting them to ask you questions that you don't have an answer for and being wise enough to be honest and say that you don't know. um, Getting that conversation started so it's not just a pitch is perhaps the most important piece of advice that I've ever received. And I've done, at least 100 pitches for different companies over the years. So getting the investor asking you questions, getting them talking, uh, will make the interaction memorable and may lead to a check.
Okay, got it. Now, what about exit strategies? So let's say that, so that was the other thing that some of our entrepreneur members of our group had asked about was, okay, so they've got a business. At what point, do you have any tips for exiting successfully and planning for that early?
Yeah, so I've had two exits so far in my kind of entrepreneurial journey, and both of them were very much the same. So I don't think I have got a ton of experience on this particular question, but I can tell you what I know. So in both cases where I've had an exit, my companies were bought actually three times now. All three times the companies were bought by another member of the team. So in one case, it was my VP of sales bought the company. In another case, it was a business partner. And in the other case, it was one of the partners as well. So all of my exits involved people that were on the teams that I was in charge of building. And it was never intentional, but that's how it happened in the three exits that I've been involved in.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and
And
there's
that's kind
all
of a nice
kinds.
way.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's all kinds of other potential exit strategies. That's just one, but in my experience, it works quite well because these people know you already, they trust you. So a lot of the,
Yeah.
the vetting and due diligence that would happen in a larger kind of, merger or acquisition doesn't have to be done. So you can move quite quickly if you're looking to exit to somebody that you've got an existing relationship with.
Right. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I think a lot of people as practice owners as well as entrepreneurs have challenges with, which is the idea of scalability and how to kind of get out of the weeds and get into the leadership mode. So I wonder if you had any advice about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel very well informed that my advice in this particular regard is quite valid because I've done it the wrong way so many damn times, that I feel like people can benefit from my mistakes. So I think, as a 16-year-old starting a business that had, two employees, which was an ice cream stand, um, you know, our idea of leadership when we begin is potentially more of what we think an employee employer relationship might look like. Um, as a really young entrepreneur, I always thought that the relationship between an employer and employee, or a CEO and the engineers on my team, was that I was meant to make sure that they were always working and always had something to do and were more like robots and less like humans. And so as a young person, kind of running a business with no experience, I just thought it was my job to like crack the whip and make them do as much work as I possibly could get out of them in an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift. And I remember being 21 and being on this board, an economic development board, and somebody taking me aside and saying, like, if you don't change, you're not going to make it as a business person. You can't be such an asshole. And I don't think I'll ever forget that like conversation, because the reason it was so impactful is this was, somebody that I had kind of put up on an incredible pedestal, a VP of finance at a large organization, somebody that I totally looked up to. And I thought to myself, like, if he's telling me this, it can't be wrong, because he's got a couple thousand employees. And so I went on a journey to kind of understand how to not be an asshole when it comes to, an employer employee relationship. And now 20 years after kind of starting that down that road, I've realized if you treat people like humans, the amount of work that a team will do and the transformation that happens in a group of people that is choosing to work together is absolutely unbelievable. So I think that that's probably my biggest takeaway, is like actually understanding what it is to be a leader. And there's tons of books out there to help you do that. I mean, one of the ones that I think I've forced people to read way too many times is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And a lot of people look at like a Dale Carnegie book like that and they're like, that just sounds manipulative, but it's not. It's not. It's just telling you that people actually like to be treated like humans. And if you treat people well, they're much more likely to do all of the things that you want them to do and much less likely to do all of the things that you don't want them to do. And I just didn't know that. I just had no idea until I was taken aside and told by somebody that I really admired, hey, stop being an asshole or you're going to fail in business.
That's some pretty blunt advice. Thanks for sharing that. That's not an easy thing to share with everybody, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
Mhm.
it for me it is easy, Melanie, because I know how much of an impact it had on me. And I
Mhm.
see so many entrepreneurs that are stuck in that kind of way of thought, which is it's my role to make sure that I crack the whip or make sure that I micromanage the shit out of people that are perfectly capable of doing things. And it's such a misstep. And
Mhm.
it literally is a recipe for disaster. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not hard for me to share that, and I'm happy to.
Those things are, I can think of definitely some really good points where people have shared very blunt advice, but it's been so important. It's hard to hear, but it's really important, and it's a catalyst for change. I always I feel like those are such important moments.
Yeah, they are. And I would add on top of that, that one of the other things that I think is really important, regardless of who it is, if you've got somebody, whether it's a friend, a peer, an employee, just anybody that's willing to come to you and say, hey, listen, I heard this, I saw you do this, I think this, and it's coming from a place of like being genuine and trying to help, for God's sakes, listen to them.
Yeah.
Just listen. Even if it hurts, even if it super stings, just listen. And just take it in. Maybe it's going to take you a couple days to take in. Maybe it'll take you a year to take in. That feedback that I got, I think it took me over a year, maybe even a couple of years before it resonated with me enough that I was like doing things actionably in my career to change it and to not be like that, not to be, a dictator. It's so interesting because there's examples of, authoritative dictators out there, and we all think it's horrible, but yet some people will come into a workplace and act like one of those, and then for some reason it's just normal. Like, it's not normal, it's not good, and it doesn't make anybody happy, including the person that's doing it.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Yeah, I love that. Now, I just want to circle back to something around kind of a topic around deciding to do the work yourself. So I wonder, did you have experience writing software or coding before you started a software company? And, or did you, that decision point about hiring out versus doing it yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I so in my most recent company, I had the luxury of being able to be a funded VC backed startup and hire some absolute professionals to kind of go down the road with me. I've got two pieces of advice here. So the first is, um, you should know a little bit about anything that you're going down the path to do. And then you should also know when you don't know. And so I think those are the two pieces of advice. So let me maybe articulate or expand on those a little bit. So I took software programming in university before I dropped out. And so I know a little bit. And I've been around software and selling software and working with software companies and technology for my entire career. So for me to build a software company, it's not a crazy stretch.
Mhm.
For somebody like my friend and co-host of my podcast, Ivan, who sold SmartFlow, for him to start a software company, he literally went out on a ledge that he didn't know anything about, but he saw a problem and thought he could fix it. But Ivan was super smart. He went and got, somebody from his past that he trusted, to partner up with him and to handle the things that he didn't know about. Well, he learned and filled in the holes. And so I think that it's, you should always know a little bit about what it is that you're wanting to do, and so if you're a veterinarian out there looking to start a software company, I would start with a few books. Start by reading a little bit, and then once you know a little bit, then you need to maybe build or bolster a team with people that you can trust that bring skills that you don't have. And I think that that's probably the third piece of advice wrapped up in this topic, which is, you know what you know. If you're good at one thing or two things, then kind of lean into those things. It's okay to dabble in things that you're not good at, but you're going to hate your career if you are doing things that you don't like all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. Is particularly, veterinarians tend to be a bit MacGyvery and a bit DIY, mostly because I think we always have to apply different things to different species, so we're always like cross-purposing things. But then a lot of times, and I say this myself too, I come from a DIY family, so it was always like a sin, just like a shameful thing to have to ask for somebody to do something for you.
Oh my
So
God.
I feel like,
I got a recent example here that's just so perfect. So we have an
yeah.
office in Halifax. We've got 14 people in that office, and we've been going through some incredible growth at Talkatoo. We grew by a third a week ago. So we went from a couple hundred users, we added a third more users in just a week. And so to celebrate our last successful quarter, we bought a couple $1,000 coffee machine for the office and got this nice kitchen set up from IKEA. And we're just kind of been making the office a little bit more pleasant to work in, especially because no one really goes there anymore. We figured, let's give everybody a reason to come in at least every once in a while. And so my business partner,
Mm.
Allie, is an incredible delegator. I mean, just incredible. And we had bought some IKEA furniture for our office, 8 months ago, and went on Kijiji and hired Andrew the assembler. And Andrew came in and assembled everything, and it was great. And so we were trying to get ready for this kind of little party that we're having at our office, gathering of the staff. And we bought this couple $100 kind of kitchen cabinet thing. And I unboxed it all. As I was unboxing it, my business partner said, "Should I call Andrew the assembler to come in and assemble that again?" I said, "No, no, I got this. It's 4:30 on a Friday. This event is happening at 5:30. I don't have any time to be assembling IKEA furniture." Anyways, I opened it all, and then I opened the instruction manual, and with 48 steps, I looked at him and I said, "Yes, you better call the assembler." And so, and so the guy came, and literally it would have taken me hours. I probably would have broken pieces of the thing as I was trying to put it together, or lost pieces, or it wouldn't have been straight, or whatever myriad of things would have gone wrong. They would have gone wrong, including my mood would have been violently disrupted. And I probably would have went into a bit of a fit of rage, ruined my whole night. So instead of that, Andrew the assembler came, and $20 later it was assembled. And it's just knowing when to step away from the things, the low value activities that are not going to add any value to you or your team, but yet you may be, in my case, sometimes I take comfort in doing those mind numbing things like building furniture. But the reality is, with a fast growing tech startup, I unfortunately don't have the time to be building IKEA furniture.
That's a very good example. I like that. Yeah, I think I'm a recovering DIY nerd, and like I have to step away at times too. So
I
thank
think
you
I
for
think we
the
could create a group. We could create a group for people like us that are in
support group.
recovery, of building their own things that they shouldn't.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So I want to thank you for your time. And where can people find you online and look you up?
Yeah, so Talkatoo is on all the social platforms, and probably the best place for me is LinkedIn or Sean at talkatoo.com. And yeah, Melanie, this has been so great. I definitely encourage your listeners, if they don't like typing, to head over and check out our software. I think they'd love it.